Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm really excited about today's video because today I'm going to be ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes from worst to best. I have been waiting to be able to film this video since I saw Kelly Gooch do this in spring this year. I knew that this is something I want to do, but at the same time I wanted to do my Shop My Shadows series first. My last video was my Shop My Shadows series finale. I have now used every single eyeshadow in my collection at least once this year. I have rotated through everything, and today I'm going to be ranking all of the eyeshadow palettes that I decided to keep. I will say that one of these palettes I am going to be decluttering, but everything that I first decided to keep I am going to be ranking, except my C palette because that is not a pre-made palette. One thing I want to mention before I get into the ranking is that I really do like all of these palettes, or at least something in all of these palettes. There is a reason why I have not decluttered this, so I just wanted to mention that even the palettes that are in the bottom of my list, I do still like at least something in them. But yeah, this video is probably going to be quite long, so let's just get to the ranking. Okay, so the two palettes I'm ranking lowest are smaller palettes with only shimmery eyeshadows in them. So for me those are not complete palettes, they are something I would use only a couple of shades from tones at once, and because of that I just cannot rank them any higher. Also, I think in both of these palettes the quality is not the best. Like, they are okay, they are nice, but they don't compare to my favorite eyeshadows. Number 16 is my e.l.f. Prism eyeshadow palette in Naked. The reason I ranked this one the lowest is that this is nothing that special in my collection. I like it, and I like it enough to pan it next year possibly, so I did the video where I asked your help if I should pan this with my Modern Renaissance or do pan those eyeshadows. So the fact that I'm considering panning this tells that I do really like it. I would not pan something that I dislike. I think these are nice shimmers. They are nothing outstanding, they are not super foiled or anything, but they are nice, basic, everyday appropriate, easy shimmers. So yeah, I don't dislike it, but it's just nothing special. Everything that is going on in this palette I do have somewhere else in my collection. So that's why I actually want to use it up. Then number 15 is this BH Cosmetics Foil Eyes Cool To Go eyeshadow palette. So this is again a 6-pan eyeshadow palette, and these are all shimmery eyeshadows. I think the formula of these eyeshadows is okay. I find they work best when you wet your brush, otherwise they can be quite powdery. But the reason I decided to rank this one higher than the e.l.f. palette is that in this palette there are some eyeshadows that I cannot find from elsewhere in my collection, when the e.l.f. palette is nothing unique to my collection. These purples are the reason why I decided to keep this palette, because I really don't have shimmery purples elsewhere in my collection. Okay, so now that those two palettes that I don't consider complete palettes are out of the way, we can move to palettes that I feel are complete palettes. So most of these are a mix of matte shadows and shimmery shadows, and then there's, I believe, 2 all matte palettes. So number 14 is the Revolution Reloaded Iconic Division eyeshadow palette, and this palette is duping the color story of ABH Subculture, and the reason this palette is ranked this low is that this one is, in my collection, probably the lowest quality eyeshadow palette. The reason I decided to keep this palette is that there are some shades in this palette that I cannot find from elsewhere in my collection. Mainly the matte greens I don't have anywhere else. But if I lost this palette today, I really wouldn't miss it that much and I wouldn't be that sad. But for now I'm going to keep this. But I will say that this is clearly the lowest quality of my palettes. The shimmers I do not like at all. They hard pan so easily. The only shimmer I like at all is this bronzy one. This green one is like a true glitter bomb, and then this duochrome shade is so bad. It's the worst eyeshadow in my collection. There's no pigment at all there. It's impossible to get it to show up. The mattes are fine in my opinion. What I like personally in a matte eyeshadow is that it's easy to work with, it's blendable. I don't mind if I need to build up a little bit. I will rather take an eyeshadow that needs to be built up a little bit but is super easy to blend out. However, I think these mattes are something that you need to build them up a little bit, but also they take more time blending. The look can be patchy really easily, and then it can be hard to blend out and you need to spend more time doing that. So it's my least favorite matte formula and least favorite shimmery formula in my collection that this palette offers. So that's why it's ranked this low. I'm going to keep this palette for now, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I decluttered it at some point, especially since I'm not the biggest fan of this color story. This color story just doesn't really speak to me that much and I don't get inspired by it. I know many people love the color story of Subculture, but for me it's a little bit too grungy and it's just not my style, to be completely honest. Then number 13 is the palette I decided to declutter, and it is the Julius Place The Masquerade palette. If you have been watching my videos previously, you probably know that I do really much love Julius Place eyeshadows, but this palette is just really not my cup of tea that much. I was actually really dreaming about this palette for a really long time, and when I finally got it, I was let down a little bit. First of all, there are some dots in this palette. For example, this green over here has gotten hard pan. Also, there are a couple of mattes with glitter in this palette, so this pink and this really warm orangey brown. I do not really like this kind of eyeshadows. Otherwise, I do really much like the quality. I love Julius Place mattes. They are one of my favorite mattes because they are so easy to work with. You will maybe need to build them up a little bit, but they will build up beautifully and they blend like a dream. So I love them. Also, most of their shimmers are stunning. But yeah, there are some dots in this palette, but also the color story is just not really my cup of tea. I love the concept of this palette, so I love that it's half colorful and half neutral. And the colorful rose I do really love. Maybe they are not colors I would reach for super often, but I like them. However, a lot of these colors I do have somewhere else in my collection, so I don't need to keep this palette because of those. I don't really like these two bottom rows of this palette, and this comes from someone who likes neutral eyeshadow usually more than colorful eyeshadow. My problem with these two rows is that there's too much repeat shade and there's not enough variety. If I'm going to do a neutral look with pop of color with this palette, the look is always going to be super warm, and I don't think it always looks the best with these shimmers. For example, this green over here and this blue, I feel they would look better with neutrals that are more cool toned or more neutrals. So that's why I wish that there was more variety between these neutrals, and I wish there was like one kind of like cool toned neutral row and one warm neutral row. So I think then this palette would make more sense. I don't dislike it, but at the same time it's not really my cup of tea. I know I wouldn't be using it much. This is my newest eyeshadow palette. I bought it in November 2018, so it's still pretty new, so I will rather give it to someone else. I will ask if my sister wants to take it, because in my collection it's going to be pretty much unused. So yeah, I don't really dislike this palette, but at the same time it's not for me, and that's why it's ranked so low. Okay, I think this video is going to take forever for me to film, so I will try to speed it up a little bit. And I feel that those Makeup Revolution palette and the Julius Place The Masquerade palette were kind of like complete palettes that I don't like that much, but the rest of my palettes I do love. And it was really hard for me to rank the next 8. On different days I might have ranked them a little bit differently, but I tried to kind of like think about the whole palette and what I like and what I don't like in it. So I think with the next palettes, so that we can get through this quite quickly, I will first tell you what I love in the palette, because I love something in every single one of the rest of my palettes, and after that I will tell you why it's not ranked higher. So the number 12 is my BH Cosmetics Modern Mattes Eyeshadow Palette. So this is an all matte eyeshadow palette with 28 eyeshadows. As you can see, I have hit pan on quite many shades. What I like in this palette is the formula. I think this is really beginner friendly matte eyeshadow formula. It's easy to use, maybe it takes a little bit of building, but I will rather take that than something that is difficult to blend out. And I feel these are really blendable eyeshadows, and especially these colors are really easy to work with if you don't have that much experience with colorful eyeshadow. I also love that there's a lot of variety in this palette, so this is something I would for sure recommend for a beginner if you are looking for an all matte palette that has neutral, has colors. I do like this. What I don't like about this palette is, well, first of all, packaging. This is like really bad. I have broken mine. So that's the first thing. Also, I will say that the black eyeshadow over here is not that good quality. I have had the same experience with other brands too, that even if they nail lighter colors and mid-toned colors, the deeper colors can be a little bit lackluster when it comes to pigment, so that's the case with this one. And I also feel that this palette lacks depth. Like, I feel these browns are too similar. I wish that instead of having so many so similar browns, I wish there were a couple of deeper browns, because I don't tend to wear black eyeshadow that often, but I tend to wear deeper brown eyeshadow almost every single day. So I think that's something that is lacking from this palette. So because of that, this one is not ranked higher, but I do love this palette. Number 11 is the Julius Place The Douce eyeshadow palette. So this is a 9-pan eyeshadow palette, and it is a mix of shimmery and matte eyeshadows, and I know this is something that many people love. I love some individual eyeshadows from this palette, like the mattes I do really much love. I think they are great, they are so good quality, they are so easy to work with. And most of the shimmers I love too, like this mint green is absolutely stunning, and so is this light pink shimmer. This shade over here is a duochrome, and I'm not the biggest fan of duochrome, so I could do without it. There is also a beautiful icy silver here that I do really much love. So yeah, this palette is something that I love the individual shades, but what I don't like about this palette and why it's not ranked higher is that I don't find this color story being really cohesive. First of all, I don't think this shade Crepes goes at all with the rest of the eyeshadows. It's just so warm toned compared to the other shades. I think it would make much more sense if it was like burgundy shade, but it is just like warm orangey brown, and I don't get it. Most of the times when I'm using this, I will need to use other eyeshadows from my collection. I don't always mind it, but yeah, I prefer if I can create a look using a palette so that I don't need to reach for other eyeshadows to create the look. I just think the color story is kind of like a little bit random. I wish there was some changes here, but at the same time I do really much enjoy this palette, and I love the pastel-y vibes this has. I think this is a great springtime palette. Number 10 is the Jeffree Star Cosmetics Androgyny eyeshadow palette. This is the only palette I do have from Jeffree Star, and honestly I don't want to get more, just because I'm not really into the color stories he puts out that much. But this palette I do really much love, and I used this quite recently. This one was in my rotation in October, and I was really surprised how versatile this palette is. and that even though the eyeshadows can seem that they are so far from each other, I really didn't need to use eyeshadows from other palettes to create looks. Maybe there's not that much shimmery eyeshadow, so maybe I would use something shimmery from a different palette on my lid, but the mattes, I could totally do a matte just using Saved Word or Charm in my crease and then put this dominatrix to the outer corner and blend it out, and it would be totally fine because these eyeshadows, they are so blendable, but at the same time the pigment is there. So I really think that these mattes are probably the best in my collection. They are really blendable and really pigmented at the same time, and I find that that's quite rare, and I love the quality in this palette. The shimmers are also stunning, they are really foiled. I really don't know why I didn't rank this palette higher. I guess it just doesn't speak to me that much. And I think this is kind of like really fall palette. I don't see myself reaching for a color story like this other than in fall. And there are some eyeshadows that I could totally do without. Like this green, this blue and this blue. I don't use that kind of eyeshadows that often. So yeah, but that's just personal preference. Overall, I do love the palette. The other palettes I do have, I love even more. Okay, so number 9 is the Seattle London Olivia Palermo Smoky Suedes eyeshadow palette. This one was in my Shop My Shadows rotation very recently, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that it's ranked this low. But I guess that the quality doesn't quite compare to my absolute favorites. And also this color story can be a little bit limiting. However, let me show the palette to you. I love this color story, I really do. When I look at it, it's the perfect rose gold eyeshadow palette. However, I think that this color story can be quite limiting. There's really not that much you can do using only this eyeshadow palette. So, for example, if I want to use this gold over here, I will use other mattes from somewhere else in my collection, and I'm just not that likely to do that because most of the time if I want to create a gold eyeshadow look, that is one of my favorite looks, I'm going to reach for a palette where I can create the complete look from. And usually I want to use warm brown mattes with gold eyeshadows. So yeah, that's why I don't use it so much, even though this is one of the most beautiful golds in my collection. And another thing is that even though I do really much enjoy the quality of this palette, I don't think it quite compares to something like Julius Place. These shimmers are beautiful, but they are kinda like just basic shimmers. There's nothing outstanding in them, and if you want like a really intense application, you will need to wet your brush to get that. The mattes are nice, but yeah, they don't compare, for example, to the Jeffree Star mattes. However, another thing I will need to say is that I absolutely love the packaging. It's so luxurious, it's so sleek, and what I especially love about this packaging is that there's not wasted space here. Then number 8 is my next year's Panda palette, the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. I know that this palette is so many people's all-time favorite palette, and I like this palette a lot too. And I love the color story of this. I love the combination of the warm neutrals and then these pinky and more cooler toned eyeshadows, and there's a lot you can do with this palette. The formula is amazing. These eyeshadows are so high quality, especially the mattes. The shimmers are not the best in my collection, like for example Vermeer and Primavera. They are good, but I do have better shimmers. I actually think these are quite similar to the Seattle shimmers I talked about previously, but the mattes of these palettes are one of the best in my collection. The pigment is totally there and they are still so blendable, and even eyeshadows that are quite far from each other blend out together so beautifully. Why it's not ranked higher is that for my personal preference there's too much matte and too little bit of shimmer in this palette. I tend to wear shimmery eyeshadow on my lid, and in this palette there's only 3 really shimmery eyeshadows. Then a couple of the eyeshadows are kind of like satiny. So for example, I would like to see a shimmer instead of raw sienna and burnt orange, because these two are going to look pretty much the same on my eyes. So I would rather take like a shimmery bronzy eyeshadow. Something I do not like in this palette is the packaging. So this one has like a velvety cover and I don't like it. As you can see, mine is really dirty, and yeah, I don't like this kind of packaging. But overall it is a beautiful palette and I cannot wait to be panning this next year. Okay, number 6 is the Urban Decay Naked Smoky Eyeshadow Palette. So this palette is really special to me because it used to be my party palette and I have talked about it previously. So this is what the palette looks like, and as the name suggests, it is a really smoky eyeshadow palette. There are some warmer shades in this palette, but it's mainly cooler toned smoky eyeshadows. And I think this is a great smoky palette. If I want to go for a silvery cool toned look, I'm going to reach for this palette. If I want to do something really dramatic and deep, I'm going to reach for this palette. And this gold is one of the most beautiful golds in my collection, because this one is not too yellow, it's actually quite pale and it's stunning. I love it. The mattes I love in this palette, I think they are all the mattes this palette really needs. I do really much love this palette, and that's why it is ranked so high. And why it's not ranked higher? Well, the simplest reason is that I just like on everyday use the other palettes that are coming a little bit more. But there is one thing I would change about this palette, and that is that in my opinion this lacks that super icy silver, because if I'm going for a cooler toned silver looks, that is what I want to wear on my lid, and unfortunately there's not silver like that in this palette, because these silvers, they are quite deep and smoky. So that is the one little change I would do for this palette, but I love this palette and the quality is great in my opinion. Also, I do really much love this packaging. I think this is stunning. This is probably the most beautiful packaging that I have. Okay, then number 6 is my Julius Place Nubian eyeshadow palette. So this is my favorite really warm neutral eyeshadow palette. I absolutely love every single eyeshadow in this palette, except maybe this red over here. I don't think it's the most flattering on my complexion, but I do still like it. As I said, I love Julius Place mattes. Also, these shimmers are so stunning. Well, maybe another shade I don't like that much is this one over here. It's kind of like a duochrome shade and I don't like that kind of shade that much. But other than these two, I love every single shade in this palette. I love how much variety there is still in this palette, even though it's warm neutrals palette. So the top row is clearly lighter. There are these couple of basic mattes and then there are these shimmery peaches. I love this middle row because all of the eyeshadows here are so different from each other. And then the bottom row, even though there's not that much variety here, these eyeshadows are different, and with these eyeshadows I can bring depth to that look, and I just love this palette. The reason I ranked this one higher than the Naked Smoky palette is that this one is more everyday appropriate for me. I just love this palette. There's not that much more I can say. Well, why it's not ranked higher? Maybe because in the end of the day, all the looks you're going to create from this palette are going to be warm toned. It's going to be a lighter or a deeper, but it is going to be warm toned, so that there's not that much variety over here, but I don't need a lot of variety from every single one of my palettes, and I do really much enjoy this palette. Then number 5, this one actually surprised me because I usually don't go for all matte palettes, except except if I'm using it with some shimmery eyeshadow palettes from my collection. But I always want to have one perfect all matte eyeshadow palette that covers all of my needs, and I happen to have that in my collection. So number 5 is because of that, the Kat Von D Shade and Light Eye Contour Palette. I have had mine for ages. I bought this in 2015 and the quality is still great, and really in this palette there's every single matte eyeshadow I could ever need. Or at least if we talk about neutral mattes. So there's this neutral part, this cooler toned part, and then this warm toned part. I think if I was more into all matte looks, there would be endless opportunities to do with this palette. I could do a lot of different really everyday appropriate looks, or I could do a lot of different smoky looks, and the quality is stunning. These are again one of my favorite mattes in my collection. Oh my god, I have a hard time deciding. Okay, I will say that the Jeffree Star mattes are like the best mattes in my collection. It's just so unbelievable how shades from so far from each other blend together so well. So you don't need to have like a million different shades you put to your crease. You can do the thing with only 2 eyeshadows. Then next I think are Julius Place, Anastasia and these mattes. With these I will say that they are super pigmented and they maybe take just a little bit more of blending if you go in with heavy hand. So a little bit of this eyeshadow goes a long way, and it can be a little bit trickier to blend out, but if you know it before you go in with your brush, you should be fine. I love this palette and I think it's my perfect all matte eyeshadow palette, and that's why it's ranked at the 5th place. Then number 4 is my favorite high-end eyeshadow palette. So my top 3 are more affordable options, which can be surprising. So number 4 is my Too Faced Chocolate Bar eyeshadow palette. I do really much love this palette. This is my oldest eyeshadow palette. I bought it in 2015. So this is what the palette looks like. I do really much love the color story because even though it's kind of like neutral, there's a lot what you can do with this palette. So you can do something kind of like more on the romantic side, like using these burgundies, but then you can do like really warm neutral looks using these warmer browns over here. The shade Marzipan over here is my favorite. I'm so surprised I have not hit pan on this yet. But yeah, I just love this palette. The quality is really good. Not all of the shades are super good quality. Like there are those couple of shades that are just really hard and flaky. Like this shade over here, this shade, also this shade. But all the other shimmers I love, and I think the mattes are just really good mattes. So I think why this palette is ranked this high is that there's a lot of different things I can do with this palette, and the quality is great, and it's my oldest palette and it still performs so well. I just really do love this palette, and I just think that from all of my high-end palettes, this is the one that I would reach for the most on everyday basis. As I said, my top 3 are more affordable options, and I think all of these are great quality. So that only shows for me that I don't need to spend a lot of money to get really nice quality. So the number 3 is the Colorpop I Think I Love You palette. I really love this palette. From all of my palettes, I think the color story of this one is my favorite. There's only one thing I would change about the color story, and it is that I would change this black eyeshadow to a deep brown, because I think that would be more useful in this palette. But overall, I love this color story. These are my type of eyeshadows. I love warm neutrals. I love these shimmery, really glam metallic eyeshadows. I think the mattes, except for the black, but I think the mattes support these shimmers beautifully, and that is what I want from my mattes in an eyeshadow palette. And I think these mattes are great quality. What comes to really affordable eyeshadows, I like these mattes most because they are so pigmented, but with these, little bit goes a long way, and if you go in with too heavy hand, they can be little bit tricky to blend out. I love the shimmers too, however, why I didn't rank this one higher is that some of these shimmers can be a little bit chunky. Like, I love the colors, I love how metallic they are, but there will be quite much fallout. But overall, that's a minor thing for me. This palette is something that I love so much, and maybe if I could keep only one eyeshadow palette, maybe this would be it. Then there is only my top 2 left. I would love to know if you can guess what they are, so if you want to guess, press pause and comment down below what you think are my top 2 eyeshadow palettes. I love both of them. I also love the Colorpop palette so much. Anyways, the number 2 eyeshadow palette in my collection is the Julius Place the Nubian 2 eyeshadow palette. I love everything in this palette, and I honestly don't have anything bad to say about this. I love the color story of this. I love how it's mainly warmer neutrals, and then there's these pops of color that make sense and that look stunning with the rest of this palette. Maybe if I had to change one thing, I would change one of these like yellow golds and I would make like a more neutral gold, but that's just me because I am so neutral with my eyeshadows so often. But if I want to have that more neutral gold, I can mix it using this shade Suri with one of these more yellow gold shades. But overall, I think every single of these eyeshadows are so high quality. Again, with Julius Place mattes, I think you need to build them up a little bit, but they are so blendable and you can come up with really deep looks using this palette. The shimmers are all stunning. They are super foiled. The reason why this one is not at the first place is that in the end of the day, I feel this palette is like a really fall time palette to me. I could use it other times a year too, but mainly I can see myself using this one in the end of the summer and in the fall time. And honestly, if I reached for this palette in springtime, I really don't know what I would do with this palette because the overall vibe of this palette is so warm, rich and a little bit deeper. Okay, then the number 1 eyeshadow palette, my favorite, is the BH Cosmetics Curly Bible Deluxe Edition eyeshadow palette. Let me know if you guessed that this one is going to be my first pick. So if you have been following me for a longer time, you know that I actually panned the original Curly Bible palette and I loved that palette, and I love this palette too. Most of the eyeshadows that were in the original Curly Bible palette I can find from this palette. The reason why this one is ranked the first is that these are really good quality eyeshadows, and actually this is of course what I'm wearing today. I wanted to wear my first pick for this ranking video. I don't think this quality quite compares to Julius Place, for example, but this is really good quality. The mattes are really easy to work with, they are really blendable, but the pigment is totally there. Also, most of these shimmers are absolutely stunning and metallic. Perhaps a couple of these lighter shimmers like this and this are a little bit weaker, but they are not bad, and with setting spray you can totally get them to be like super foiled if you want to. But overall I love the quality of this palette. I think it's great. The highlighters I love too. As you can see, there's a lot of empty pans here. These two I crushed because they are not highlighters on my skin, and this gold one I completely used up. I finished it in a project pan actually, and I'm working on this white too. This pink highlighter is stunning, but we are not talking about the highlighters today. We are talking about only the eyeshadows. I love the variety in this palette. I love how there are these 3 different rows that all make sense. So there's this orangey pinky row, then there is this kind of like plummy movie row, and then there is this neutral golden brown row. All of the rows make sense. You can create a look using the eyeshadows from only that certain row, or of course you can mix the rows. Today I am wearing this shade as a transition shade, this shade in my crease, and then this deeper plum shade in the outer corner, and I also blended it to my crease, but I wanted to wear this brown just to warm up the look a little bit, and then I'm wearing this beautiful gold on my lid, and then of course on the brow bone I'm wearing this shade over here. There's just so much you can do with this palette, so I don't know if I had to keep only one palette, which one I would keep, this Carly Bible palette or this Colorpop palette. I don't know. Okay, so that was everything for today. It was super fun to film this video. I do really love all of my eyeshadow palettes, or maybe I don't love the Julius Place, the Masquerade palette that I decided to declutter, and also I don't necessarily love the Revolution palette, and then the two eyeshadow palette that were ranked on the bottom. Those I do like, but as I said, they are not complete palettes for me, so that's why I couldn't rank them higher. But it was really fun to film this video, and I feel that everything else I do really much love in my collection. Let me know down in the comments what is your least favorite eyeshadow palette. Have you considered decluttering it? Or do you still want to keep it for some reason, even if it's your least favorite? And also let me know if you do have a favorite eyeshadow palette over everything else, or if you cannot decide, let me know your top 3 eyeshadow palettes. I would really love to know, because I do really much love eyeshadows. So yeah, that was everything for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you in my next one. That is going to be actually my Panda palette intro for 2020. Bye bye!